Most likely, I'm sure. It's very stupid anyway. Another day, another trip up to Napa.
The endless the headlines that are related to GLP-1s and obesity and cancer, but the reality is there's a lot more to this company before the GLP-1 business ballooned with regards to obesity. And one of the areas they're in is immunology, or otherwise known as immunology and inflammation, or inflammation and immunology, I&I. And I&I is also a very attractive area because these are areas where we all have issues with arthritis, psoriasis, Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease. All these things are stuff that we have been suffering from for years. Obesity probably increases the risk too. So, and they've been a very active company in that space with 4 drugs on the market already, and they've been doing deals adding to it.
And $3.2 billion is not a big deal for Lilly, but is this typical of what we see out of big pharma companies in terms of if they see a therapeutic or just a piece of science that's interesting to them, it's better to buy than develop internally?
Yeah, but I would say that around 30 to 40% of pharmaceutical companies' pipeline comes from this type of interaction. Either an M&A deal, i.e. I bought the whole thing, lock, stock, and barrel, or I license a specific product.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Subscribe on Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And Bloomberg.com. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hi, everybody. 20 minutes before the top of the hour, we take a look at markets for you. Moving a little higher here for equities in Asia. The Nikkei expanding 270 points. That's up 2/3 of 1%. The ASX 200 also up 2/3 of 1%. Interesting in the Tokyo market, information technology and utilities, the two gaining sectors with gains of more than 1.5%. But it's a day where most sectors are actually higher. And Seoul, the Kospi has moved up about 0.3%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is essentially flat here at the moment. Dollar yen 160.82. The euro trading at $1.0830, and the yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury 4.27%. Well, you've heard us mention we've got some significant events this week. We'll have Jay Powell in front of Congress. So that could get interesting and exciting. The I report for June comes out on Thursday, and then earnings getting started at the banks on Friday. That is a check of markets. It's not
Thank you very much, Brian. President Biden calling on congressional members of his party to end Biden on MSNBC saying Trump must be stopped and he is the person to do it.
I'm not going to explain anymore about what I should or shouldn't do. I am running.
Meanwhile, he has been meeting today, this evening, early evening, Washington, D.C., to meet with black lawmakers and pushing to quash a Democratic revolt. Meanwhile, the White House pushing back on questions about why a neurologist has been visiting. The doctor reported to be a Parkinson's specialist, and the daily briefing became a bit contentious for Corinne Jean-Pierre.
We share comprehensive reporting. Matter of fact, it's more than what the last guy shared, and it is in line with what George W. Bush did. It's in line with what Obama did. And so it is comprehensive. It is out there. I just read a quote from it, but I am not going to divulge somebody's name or confirm someone. I'm not going to do that.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has met with Chinese President Xi Jinping to discuss potential Ukraine peace deal. And Vladimir Putin is meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has been during the day. Modi in Russia for the first time in 5 years. A number of issues have piled up. Ukraine's largest children's hospital has been destroyed by a Russian missile, shaking the capital of Kyiv. Images of bloodied and injured children hospital strike is part of a barrage of bombings by Moscow across the country. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want. Bloomberg News Now in San Francisco. I'm Ed Baxter, and this is
All right, thanks very much, Ed. Our guest is Anna Rathbun, CIO at CBIC Investment Advisory Services. Anna, we're coming into earnings season, and you've got analyst upgrades on profit outnumbering downgrades, but at the same time, you've got forward, say, 12-month earnings estimates at an all-time high, and that's coming at a time when it looks like the economy is slowing. Does the bond market look more attractive now than the stock market?
Good evening. Thanks for having me. I feel like the bond market and stock market have different things to worry about. Starting with the stock market, we are not been priced for perfection here. We're priced for outperforming perfection. And on top of that, as you mentioned, the expectations keep going up. I do think that the market is probably right for some kind of a downturn. And so from that perspective, maybe bonds are more attractive. If you look at some Treasury yield action, definitely from the last week, there was a response to some of the weaker underpinnings of the labor market on Friday. Despite the fact that the headline said 206,000 jobs gained, the 10-year actually fell. So I do think that there's room for the Treasury market to actually react to some of the slower softer economic data that we do anticipate will continue. So if we're looking at stocks versus stocks, I do think that there's room for stocks to gain and certainly room for bonds to gain and for certainly room for stocks to correct.
So you're talking about the reaction to the bond market. I'm more curious about the reaction function on the part of the Fed. I mean, when do we get the first rate cut?
So we'll see what he says tomorrow, Mr. Powell. I mean, that testimony is going to be sliced and diced, like the meeting minutes were, but I think there's a lot of anticipation for tomorrow, especially because in the meeting minutes it was pretty clear that we're sort of coming off of the worries about inflation. There is definitely some confirmation of belief that disinflationary forces will continue, especially when it comes to the labor market. And then Friday, we got a labor market looking at a second cut.
So you're looking for a correction. I wonder whether or not, during that correction, you might see a little bit of weakness or at least a little bit of a warning or a slowdown for NVIDIA and some of the AI players. And if you got those things together, could it go further than, say, a roughly 10% correction?
Certainly the narrow leadership in the marketplace, that's definitely possible. I mean, if we're talking about a technical definition of a correction, 10%, it certainly could be bigger. But we're talking about NVIDIA and certainly Max 7. And if you think about it, they're all sort of codependent on one another. The other Max 7s that are sort of incubating the AI programs that are not yet cash positive, they're relying on NVIDIA, and NVIDIA is relying on them. So if there's softness in any one of them relating to the AI narrative, I think you can see a pretty big action there. But I would say that I don't think everything is about AI, about the big tech companies. If you think about it, they do have a lot of cash. They do have a lot of earnings. They have pretty safe balance sheets. So a lot of capital chasing these names. I think part of it is just chasing quality, chasing a better balance sheet. Never mind that there is risk of these codependency and certainly the AI hype. So I think there's a little bit of a mixed story there. So that would be one scenario in which the downside may not be as big as we might expect.
To what degree is there the risk of market volatility as a result of the November election? I mean, this is kind of stunning what we're dealing with just in the news cycle lately, and it's kind of surprising that the market is holding up, in a pretty stable fashion. Is there some point at which this turns into a case of greater volatility?
Normally, I don't really expect to see the markets react to any kind of election uncertainty until the fall. So I'm sort of waiting until after Labor Day. Now, if we do have a Fed cut in September, that might be different news, and there's a lot of moving parts there. But I think that the markets, Treasury markets included, they're sort of looking for, will there be a sweep by one party? It's not just about Joe Biden versus any other candidate. We still have a little bit of time for that. I think we have at least a month, right? But if the voters lose such confidence that there is a one-party sweep, let's say a Republican Party sweep, it's not so much about the Republican Party, but it's that one party can actually pass something that could be detrimental to the current crisis in the deficit profile, in the debt profile of the United States. And I think the markets will react to a one-party sweep rather than who becomes president.
Anna, this program is about Asia, and we also talk about sort of intersection with the closing of Wall Street and the opening of markets here, and then we phase into, more distinct coverage of Asia. We do have some big things coming up. We've got the third plenum in China, and also we're looking at a situation in Japan where, you're also facing some change. Do either of those markets interest you at this juncture?
We have been a bit dovish on China. Dovish not in the Fed sense, but softer on China in terms of outlook, and we have been underweight. And a huge part of it is that I don't think the real estate debacle, that's not the best choice of words, is over. And we are afraid of some of the intervention by the government, and so we're a little bit softer on China. On Japan, we have been relatively bullish. The only issue is the currency, right? The weakness in currency tells us something.
Yeah. All right, Anna, thank you for joining us. Anna Rathman, CIO at CBIZ Investment Advisory Services. I'll be just a look at unemployment in China, and also, will Japan start to sell dollar assets and buy yen assets? That's coming up. This is Bloomberg.
Now, your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 960.
Around the Bay Area for tonight, clear to occasionally partly cloudy, low temperature 55 to 60. Tuesday, mostly clean skies and breezy, 80 to 90 inland, 70 to 80 from the Bay, and 90 to 100 inland on Wednesday with lots of sunshine, 75 to 90 from the Bay. More of the same likely on Thursday, too, 90s inland, 80s from the Bay. This is Gary Best with your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 960.
When you want it, get the latest headlines with Bloomberg News Now.
Major developments involving the war in the Middle East.
The top headlines from Bloomberg News, updated continuously throughout the day.
President Biden and Donald Trump made campaign appearances.
Get the latest news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now.
Tesla investors still believe in CEO Elon Musk.
Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. And anywhere you get your podcast. Bloomberg News Now. Context changes everything.
When was the last time I took a road trip? How many national parks could I hit in 2 weeks? What about hotels? Wait, hey Erica, how much am I spending on travel?
When your questions about life turn into questions about money, there's Erica, the virtual financial assistant to help you spend, save, and plan smarter. Only from Bank of America. What would you like the power to do? Erica is only available in the English language. You must download the latest version of the mobile banking app, only available on select mobile devices. Your chat may be recorded and monitored for quality assurance. Message and data rates and additional terms may apply. Bank of America N.A. member FDIC.
Volatile markets, global elections, central bank policy. You've got questions about the business stories that affect your world. Let Bloomberg give you the answers. I'm Stephen Carroll. Join me for Here's Why, a new podcast that drills into one big story each week. We'll explain it in just a few minutes with help from one of our 2,700 journalists and analysts across the globe. Listen to Here's Why on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app or wherever you get your podcasts.
trading, risk, operations. Connected. The buy side. From every side. Visit Bloomberg.com/buy side.
On the latest edition of the Big Take Podcast, with the U.S. presidential election on the horizon and no end in sight to the Russia-Ukraine war, Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern sat down with Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky for an exclusive interview. Host Sarah Holder spoke with Bloomberg's lead on national security coverage, Nick Water, to analyze what the outcome of the election could mean for the future of Ukraine.
Do we have any idea what Trump means when he said he'd settle the war?
The short answer to that is no. No one has any real sense for what President Trump's ideas are or how he would figure out the war in Ukraine. There is some speculation around the idea that he would eventually pressure Ukraine to give up its claims on a lot of the territory in the east that Russia took both several years ago, but also as part of its invasion in February of 2022. But that's something that Ukraine has said does not happen under any conditions. So still a lot of questions about that, but I think what you see there is something we saw a lot from President Trump during his administration, which is really his belief in himself as a deal maker, that if he can get the two sides in the room, he will just be able to work out a solution.
On the other hand, Biden indicated during the debate and during his campaign that he would hold firm, continue supplying Ukraine with money. What would a Biden win mean for Zelensky and for Putin?
I think what you see from Biden is essentially more of the same. So the real belief that they need more money, they need more military assistance, they need more and more advanced weapons systems, and that really U.S. support is absolutely fundamental to Ukraine's ability to win the war, and that's not something they would give up on. Of course, the big question there is whether he would face any resistance from Congress. A lot will depend on who controls Congress. There's only so much President Biden can do here.
That's what's on the latest edition of the Big Take Podcast. Listen to the full episode on Apple, Spotify, the Bloomberg Business app, or anywhere you get your podcasts.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
8:55 on Wall Street. I'm Doug Krisner in New York at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We've got positivity in equity markets across the APAC. At the top of the hour, trading will be underway in Taiwan and Singapore. Right now in Tokyo, a higher Nikkei. We're up about 0.8%. Information tech, utilities leading the way higher. Meantime, in Sydney, the ASX 200 is higher by around 0.6%. Communication services and material stocks leading that advance. Meantime, in Seoul, the Kospi rising about, let's call it 0.3%. Healthcare stock. Tomorrow will kick off 2 days of testimony from Fisher Chief Powell. Receiving tomorrow at the Senate Banking Committee, followed by an appearance to the House Financial Services Committee on Wednesday. He'll likely say that further confirmation of slower inflation is necessary before the interest rate. Thursday, PPI then on Friday. Wednesday, now in terms of U.S. yields, change now a 10-year at 4.27, a 2-year at 4.62. In New York trading, we actually picked up a little bit at the short end, where the 2-year was higher by around 2 basis points. The earnings season will begin on Thursday here in the U.S. We'll hear from Delta Airlines and PepsiCo on that day, followed Friday by big banks. And that's Wells Fargo and Bank of New York Mellon. The dollar right now steady against the majors. A little bit of weakness in the yen, not much at 160.90. We'll take another look at market action for you on the other side of the top of the hour. It's time for the media review. Brian?
I've got 3 stories. See which one you think is most important. I think we'll get it. Okay, so let's get started here from the South Carolina Post. The first one, layoffs in China outburn the key industries show unemployment rate rising. The Post reviewed 23 annual reports from leading Chinese firms and found that more than half of them downsized last year. Others slashed staff-related expenses. In the property sector, all 5 market cap leaders saw a decrease in employee numbers in 2023. Poly Real Estate, China's biggest developer by market cap, cut 16% of employees, or 11,000 jobs.
In the internet sector, similar cost cut. Alibaba cutting 20,000 jobs last year. So who was hiring? And aggressively, its workforce was added by 130,000 employees. So that's number one story. Number two, also in the Post, Chinese migrants are making the perilous trek to the United States via crossing the Mexican border. They're doing so with plenty of risks, but also plenty of dreams. The story says that they are finding skepticism and uncertainty among other Chinese immigrants who can help them start their new lives. And then finally, this one from the Wall Street Journal. Japan might start redirecting billions of dollar assets into yen holdings. Japan owns one of the world's biggest dollar stashes. The government pension investment fund is an investment wave. It has $1.53 trillion in assets. Now, half of the total is held in foreign stocks and bonds, mostly in dollars. This fund is said to be about to start a once every 5-year review as the changes might be coming. Takahide Kyuchi, who is from the Nomura Research, his biggest work at BOJ, says the thinking has changed in Japan. He says a decade ago, the government and central bank wanted to encourage Japanese people to take bigger risks with their money and get out of their funk. And there was also an element of wanting a cheaper yen. Kyuchi says now, absolutely, no one is looking for a cheaper yen. All right, so that is the true story. So I'm curious, Doug, which one do you think is most impactful?
I'm a big fan of getting out of your funk, so I have to go with the Japan story. Although don't underestimate those job losses in China. That's a very interesting story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew you'd pick Japan. I got it right. See, Doug and I compete, but it makes us better. We love it. All right, top of the hour, top stories next, and the markets. Next hour, Bloomberg Daybreak Asia begins right now.
This is KNEW Oakland, OSF 103.7 FM HD2 San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, programming paid for by Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia for this Tuesday, July 9th in Hong Kong, Monday, July 8th in New York. And coming up this hour,
Fed Chair Jay Powell will likely face pressure from congressional lawmakers on the timing of rate cuts.
Microsoft bans Android phones among workers in China.
And Eli Lilly agrees to buy the gut drug maker Morphic. White House loudly denies any claims that Biden has Parkinson's. Biden defiant, saying he is not going to drop out and not going anywhere. France ponders what's next. I'm Ed Baxter with Global News.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 121, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, just after 9 o'clock here in Hong Kong. I'm Brian Curtis.
And I'm Doug Krisner at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York, a little past 9 in the evening on Wall Street. Now we're getting trading underway in Taiwan and in Singapore. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, hour 2 of the program, and we're brought to you by IBKR. If you are a financial advisor, why not switch to Interactive Brokers? You'll get the lowest cost, global trading and turnkey custody solutions, no ticket charges, no conflicts of your interest at ibkr.com/RIA. So speaking of market action, we check it throughout the day here on Bloomberg. In Taiwan right now, the TAIEX out of the gate is up about 0.4%. In Singapore, meantime, strength going higher by 0.6%. Seeing a fair amount of positivity after a record-setting session in the U.S. That said, we're talking about gains for the S&P. Yes, it was an all-time high, but only up 0.1% on the day. I think it's fair to say that markets are bracing for some key events this week. It begins tomorrow with the testimony of Fed Chair Jay Powell. We'll get 2 days. Tomorrow, Senate Banking Committee, followed by the House Financial Services Committee on Wednesday. Thursday, very important because it's the CPI print for the month of June, and then Friday, PPI data for the month of June in the U.S. And then tomorrow in Beijing.